Good
Hello?
morning, everybody. Welcome to Off the Cuff. We're having some technical difficulties, one or two little technical difficulties. Well, it's par for the course over the last few weeks because we've been having some technical difficulties on and off for ages and ages. However, you might be able to hear something going on in the background. I'm hoping you can hear me well enough or clear enough. We're going to be switching back and forth this morning because on with me, that's the noise you can hear in the background. On with me is Violet, who is my wonderful friend, and we thought we'd have Violet in our on the cuff show today because she posed the question about stigmata. So before we go into anything else, first, oh, there you are. Well, I'm still speaking, but still, before we go into anything else, yay! We split screen. You did it, Chris.
Woohoo!
Amazing. So, first of all, great, good. So, before we go into anything else, first of all, I'd like to say good morning to Grey Eagle, who, as always, is to my right side and always with us, and to say good morning to Chris, our great facilitator. Look at this. Chris facilitates all of these shows. And I don't know what you did, Chris. You obviously pressed the right button just at the right moment. And now we're on split screen. So everybody, you can see my lovely Violet, who is on with us. Violet, good morning.
Hello, how are you? Good morning, good afternoon.
Well, yes, that's
From
right. People
the
don't
UK.
people don't know that, do they? It's morning for me and it's afternoon for you. You're 5 hours. We're 5 hours apart. But look at us. We're sitting side by side, 5 hours apart. You know, in the sort of 15th and 16th century, what do you think they would have made of this? Do you think they would have thought we were witches or something?
100%. We would, or on the ducking stool or something.
Yeah. Oh no, I know the ducking stools. You remember the ducking stools? You couldn't you couldn't win, could you? They'd put you in. For those of you who don't know what the ducking stool is, if they thought you were a witch, they'd strap you to what they called the ducking stool, and they'd sort of lower you into the water, into the pond, into the lake, or wherever. And if you sort of survived, and they pulled you up, and you were still alive, then you were a witch. And if you
I think it
died,
was
you weren't, right? What kind of
water. I think the water was supposed to cleanse you, and if you drowned, that means so you were godly.
yeah,
And if you didn't drown, you were burnt.
you were guilty. It's like I don't know who it was who reasoned that out, but whoever it was someone who was determined to be right. Right? You know, that person who's always determined to be right, no matter what, I'm going to be right. And sometimes I say to people, okay, I'm going to ask you a question. Would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? You will be amazed at how many people say I'd rather be right. Thank you, because I am,
Wow.
and that's how it is. But people who are right all the time are definitely, absolutely miserable. So, all right. Well, you're looking gorgeous. You're looking beautiful. Your hair looks fantastic, fabulous, and so on. Look at my hair. Don't know what happened to it this morning. I've got that Mohican look going on there.
You always look gorgeous, Rosemary. You know you do.
So,
Now, I must apologise in advance because I'm on my phone difficulty keeping it steady.
you're doing what?
So my camera work is all over the place, and
Oh, don't
I'm
worry.
wobbling around the screen. So
Don't worry. It shows your gorgeousness. So here we are. We're having a what is it? A lovely little love fest between us. So here we are. We're off the cuff. Now it isn't quite off the cuff because off the cuff means like without thought. But we did think about this just a little bit. We did make plans to do this just a little bit. So, but it's still off the cuff. Now, I think it was on Thursday, Violet, you asked my opinion of stigmata, and I think you said,
Hmm.
did I think that it was psychosomatic? Did I think it might be real? Did I think it was some sort of physical phenomenon that really happens, or is it all just one big fat hoax and it never really happened? Now I have to tell you that the amount of people that I spoke to about this since Thursday, and I've spoken to a lot of people who've actually said to me, "What is it? What is stigmata?" So you and I know, uh, but a lot of people don't know. So I'm going to see if I can give an explanation to it before we start to discuss it, and then you can, if, as I'm explaining, feel free to just jump in anytime you feel like. Okay, so um, okay, so stigmata goes back, I think, to the days when Christ was nailed to the cross. I suspect that it happened before then. I suspect that it's happened to a lot of people since then, and many people. But it is for whatever reason, it seems to me. And if you agree with me, if you disagree with me, Violet, again, jump in. It seems to be a Catholic thing, um, and people who experience stigmata. I'm getting there. I promise you, I'm getting there. I'll tell you what it is in a minute. People who experience stigmata. I think you said to me, Violet, that all of the people who've had that experience have been canonized. In other words, they've been made saints, right? Um, but that's as far as the Catholic Church goes. Now, stigmata, what happens or does it? This is the discussion we're going to have this morning. Um, very often applies to people who perhaps have had a vision, or they are very connected to Christ or to Mother Mary or the Catholic Church. It's a very um, religious thing, and they experience um, the feelings and they experience what happened to Christ when Christ was on the cross. So stigmata generally, not always, but generally, is when you can see the bleeding from the palms and also bleeding from the feet, which is where Christ was apparently nailed to the cross. And so, very often, when stigmata is the bleeding of, or the apparent bleeding of, these particular areas for no reason other than connected to some sort of spiritual experience or spiritual phenomenon. Do you think I've explained that clearly enough? Do you want to add to it?
I do. I think that's a good description. I do think it's a Catholic
Violet, we
phenomenon.
cannot hear you.
Oh,
Keep
no.
talking. Make sure you're in front of the microphone, darling.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right, super. Um, my understanding is that it's a phenomenon, a spiritual phenomenon.
Yes.
And I was interested in whether this was going on, and I hate to use the word supernatural, but you understand what I mean when I say that. Something that was psychosomatic. And from what I read, people who experience the wounds of Christ,
Yeah.
whether that's the crown of thorns, the crucifixion through the feet and the hands, and also a weir, and I think maybe scourging, I'm not sure, or something like that. But it's really interesting because when I read about it, I read that one of the first stigma St. Francis of Assisi, which I think was around the 13th
Yeah.
century, and more recently Padre Pio, who was in the
Padre
20th
Pio.
century.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And 50 years. And it was reported that the wounds and the blood smelled flowers, and that people would come to him, obviously because it attracted an enormous and people would come to him in droves, as it Lords with the vision, and he would give people reading, which is apparently he would give people a word of advice for something I'd never heard about, and also he was supposed to have been able to phenomenon called bilocation, so he could be in more than one place at the same time. Like, okay, this is new. So it seemed to be something really, and I really wanted to know what your opinion was about what or whether it is real, or what you think about it, because Padre Pio suffered. It hurt. It was painful.
Yeah.
This isn't something you want to experience.
Well, let me just explain a little bit about Padre Pio. And I'm not sure, but he's almost like a modern day Francis of Assisi. He's so many people in our day and age know about Padre Pio. I mean, he was I do believe he's sainted, and he was a very simple, very humble priest, and began to experience all of these incredible phenomena. And if you can imagine, you're walking along the street, or you're sitting down and you pray, maybe praying or something. I mean, it could happen even probably in the grocery store. All of a sudden you begin to bleed, and you're bleeding from those apparently from those same wounds, except you don't have the wounds. You don't see the wounds. You just see the bleeding coming from where the wounds were on Christ. So it's very much, and it makes me smile a little bit, because this is a very Catholic thing, um, um, but it's also a very Christian thing. But you rarely hear of the Christian church talking about stigmata. Stigmata. When you talk about stigmata, it is the bleeding from the wounds of Christ, or somebody's experiencing the bleeding from the wounds of Christ. Padre Pia, I had a fabulous patient of mine who was very much into Padre Pia, which is why I know a little bit about Padre Pia. Um, and she used to carry his picture around with her. She would carry all sorts of things that Padre Pia, people collected stuff that he put out for them. He would sort of perhaps give them a small prayer book, or he'd give them a little cross or something like that. People were and still today are very, very into Padre Pia and his teachings. But was he a medium? And it would seem, I think, we're looking at someone who can, let's say, give advice, which is what a medium does. They connect with that higher power, that higher spiritual source, which is what Padre Pia did, and giving information out, which is the same thing that a medium does. I, as a medium, have never experienced stigmas, just to be clear, because I know somebody out there is going to be thinking, well, Rosemary, did you ever experience that? And I have a very, very special relationship with Christ. Let's go to is it real? Is it possible? My opinion, Violet, because I know you were looking for my opinion on this. My opinion is yes. I do believe that it's possible, but I also believe it can be, psychosomatic. I think, the brain can do amazing things. The power of thought can do amazing things. So I don't necessarily think you have to achieve sainthood in order you know, to be an incredibly spiritual person. But I don't think that you have to be a spiritual person necessarily to experience stigmata. So I think it happens more than we think it does. I don't think the Catholic Church has got, let's say, the what is it? the take on all of this. I think it is across the board. I think it's worldwide. But I think that, if you are, let's say you become very involved. I know there are people out there who will say, I am Christ reborn, and so on. Can they, thinking that they're Christ, believing that they're Christ, and who knows, maybe they are, I don't know. But let's say somebody comes along in modern day times and says, I've been reborn and I'm Jesus Christ. And I did have a conversation with someone a couple of years or so ago who really believed that he was Christ and claimed that he would bleed, not that I ever saw it, but claimed that he would bleed from his old wounds. Um, we could put that down to him being a nutcase, couldn't we? But if you believe enough that you are someone, can you make it happen? Can you, using your mind, using your energy, because every one of it is energy, could you make it happen without any godly or spiritual interference? And I think it's possible that people can do that and not necessarily have any deeply spiritual connection to it other than in their own mind and what they're but I also think that there are some amazing spiritual things that happen to people that I mean, out of body is one of them. You made me smile when you talked about Padre Pio and you said um, he could be in two places at the same time. Yeah, I've done that. I've been there. I've done that. And it's that's I won't say it's easy to do. It is easy to do. It's easy to do for me because I literally can be in two places. I can be. I always refer to it as going down and back and through the hole. If you visualize that the universe, Gregor once described the universe to me as like holes in a cheese. If you have a big ball of cheese, big round ball of cheese, let's say it's an Emmenthal or something like that, and you cut it in half, and you can see the holes going this way, that way, some going up, some going across, some parallel, some crossing, and Gregor described that as being like the universe. There's many different passageways going every which way. Can you imagine? So when I'm going down and back and through the hole, I'm going through one of these passageways. My physical body can stay exactly where it is here, but my etheric spirit body can be moving, albeit still attached to me, and I can be very aware. I can be in another place, even in another country, and
Wow.
talking about what I'm seeing, but being here in the present as well. So things are weird, aren't they? Lots of different weird things can happen. And I don't think we should discount any of it. So personally, I think that stigmata is possible and very likely. Does it have anything to do with spirituality? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sorry, go ahead.
I think the thing that I find is, I think partly because there's the people have such reverence we do, and it's almost like what people now describe where people feel somebody else's pain.
Yeah.
Maybe not physically as like a physical manifestation of someone else's pain, but you can walk into a room and that someone's upset because you on somebody else's emotional state rather than their physical well-being. It kind of toying around with what was going off, whether it's to do with chakras and you mentioned palm centers because of where the wounds were, which is interesting. I think it's an interesting parallel.
Well,
And
we as healers, we use palm centers, for those the chakra points for healing. We use it to pass energy and move energy.
interesting, it kind of, when you go down the rabbit hole with these things sometimes, it's
Yes,
you, of course, where you go down, goodness knows what
literally.
hole you're going down, I'm not sure. I was thinking very much around what, so for instance, people who Padre Pio, and people like your friend who carry Belia or whatever it is that they carry, but it gives them. And I'm kind of interested because a saint is still a human. They may pass over into the spirit world, and I'm kind of intrigued by all of this kind of reverence that they're getting from people, and I'm assuming people. I mean, there's something around Saint James, Saint Anthony. Something's lost that must be found, and I know that people call on Saint Anthony for lost objects. And I'm thinking, well, these are still human beings. They get inundated with requests for lost car keys or the need for a miracle of healing or something. I don't know. And I just thought it was an interest on what happens to people who are canonized.
Well, I think the same thing happens to them as happens to all of us. I think they're only canonized
Right.
here on this earth. We as human beings see them as something special, and maybe they are. But I don't. I think whoever we are, whatever we've done, I think the same rules pretty much apply to all of us, whether we've been declared saints or sinners. I think that we all go through the same process. We're only seen as saints or sinners through our human eyes. No
Yeah.
matter what the Catholic Church says, they are human, and priests and even the Pope. Well, gosh, even that. I'm not. I don't want to upset anyone, but I have to tell you that even the Pope, is human. So we're looking with human eyes. But I want to just come back to something that you said, and then we'll go to the chat room and see what
Sure.
kind of comments we've got there. You said, that people can be sensitive enough to feel other people's pain or to sense other people's pain. And, there are people who are so sensitive that, for instance, a man can literally go through labor pains for his wife. It has been known that the wife sails through the labor and the husband is experiencing all of the pain and all of we wish that that would happen more often, don't we? But there are people who are so in tune with other people, who are so sensitive to other people. You get people like twins, for instance, who one twin can be half a world away, and the other twin can be hit by a car, and that twin
I
knows,
know.
even feels. So I think it
Wow.
depends on the sensitivity. So if you are a person who is particularly sensitive to Christ and to all of that, why not have those same experiences that twins have? Why not have those same experiences that the man who's so involved with his child inside his wife's womb, uh, feels all of that stuff that's going on, and it does happen. And it's sort of, I can't remember now what they call it, but it's sort of like sympathetic. I think they call it sympathetic pains. Uh, and so, are these people who are experiencing stigmata? Are they simply experiencing sympathetic, going through a sympathetic experience in a physical way with what happened to Christ?
I think it's interesting that from what I read that Padre Pio on when he passed.
Yeah.
Um, and I found that fascinating. And also, that I think historically there are more women than men, which I thought was interesting.
Well, yes. Aren't women supposed to be more sensitive than men? I don't think that's actually true, but depends on the person. Let's go to the chat room. Chris, first of all, I've got to ask you, is there anybody out there, or are we just having a great time, having a nice conversation for ourselves?
How about we say both?
Okay, well, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so early on when you first broached this subject, we have a few Karens on here. So Karen had said that there was a movie called Stigmata. Have either of you seen it?
I've
No,
seen it.
you've seen it. So, no, I haven't.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Judith says, "Welcome, Violet. I love this subject. I've read so much. I believe in psychosomatic too. We are creators.
Mm.
Yes, sympathetic creation."
Okay. Keep going, Chris.
That's all I have for comments right now.
Oh, okay.
That's
All
interesting.
right. So now I'm going to move the subject slightly. I know it's an interesting subject, it's a fascinating subject, but somehow or another, when we were talking about this yesterday, Violet, or whenever it was, the day before, um, I don't know how we got onto the subject of old wives' tales.
We did.
So now, is stigmata an old wives' tale? Does it really happen? And what other old wives' tales are there out there that, I mean, are they real? Are they based in reality, or are they some silly old ladies' imagination run riot?
I have on this, which I think is that into I was brought up very superstitious, and that's partly because side of the family they were Romany, and they did all of that stuff and looking in an open fire and all of that business, and it wasn't something that I ever questioned being as a child. It was just you just don't. Oh no, don't do that. And that included things like putting new shoes on a table. It involved looking at the moon through a window. You had to look at the new moon through. Saw the full moon, you turned silver over in your pocket. If you saw a baby, you gave them silver. If there's a black cat crossed your path, it was good luck. You do not open an umbrella. And so, and this was just things that were so matter of fact as fact. And then growing up, it's a bit like, well, that doesn't actually make much sense. Open an umbrella, nothing terrible is going to happen, but maybe I won't, just in case. And there was an interesting study done by a university around this kind of idea of sympathetic magic, I suppose you'd call it. And they took us at a university and they interviewed them, and they were like, "Are you super of rubbish?" Blah 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 blah. And they asked them all to bring a photograph they loved, and then they were asked to put a knife through it and to stab, and lots of people refused to do it.
Yeah.
And it was something to do with the primitive. That actually, there is an idea of what if it did happen. So this is actually far more we care to think. In terms of putting an umbrella up, I read somewhere that it dates back to ancient Egypt, whereby they to keep them from the shade, and you would not take a parasol into a temple because it was. And so I think some of these are like maybe so from what they originally were that we've forgotten the root,
Good,
but the
good reason
purpose.
why. Yeah.
But yeah,
What was it you said? I'm sort of thinking of the phrase that you used, sympathetic magic.
sympathetic magic. subtracting like, and if and there was a book called The Doctrine of Signing to do with like medicine, herbal medicine. So a walnut, for instance, because it looked like a brain, and something with heart-shaped leaves would be good for the heart. I think that there's that element of, and if you think around, I suppose certain cultures have developed religious systems as well, and I'm thinking of what happened with and people being taken as slaves from Africa to the Caribbean, and
sorry, hold on. Can I just stop you? You froze there for me. Chris, did she freeze for you or not?
You were the one frozen, Rosemary.
Oh, okay. I'll repeat.
Okay.
I'll repeat it. I think in terms of things like the when some of the slaves were taken to the Caribbean, and the different religions flourished because they were practicing under the umbrella of Catholicism. Developments of Macumba, Santeria, Candomblé, all of those kind of fusion faith, and some of them also practice sympathetic magic. And if you think about it in terms of, oh, well, when people are enslaved, I mean, I can imagine to get out of that situation.
Yeah, I think, I was actually saying when I was frozen and nobody was listening to me, but I was saying, no, but I'm thinking sympathetic magic. I mean, stigmata is an example of sympathetic magic, right? You have the sympathy with Christ, the sympathy with the fact that someone is crucified, nailed to a cross. I mean, that's grim. But you also have the magic of the bleeding, which is, the magic that evolves from somebody actually being so sympathetic and so connected to Christ or to the idea of crucifixion, whatever it is. So we're talking about magic a little bit, and there's a lot of talk about black magic and witch doctors, and we often apply that to Africa and to into those areas. And I think that probably because of the movies that we watch, we think that we have an idea of black magic as deriving from evil. But in fact, that kind of magic, which I think is sympathetic magic, well, it's sort of derived from Christianity and derived from an idea of goodness, and it was a good thing. Which I think the movies and the idea that people have of Africa and all of that has turned into something that is supposedly evil. But if you read up about it, if you check it out, it's actually based on beautiful religious beliefs, beautiful and good and pure, the pure idea. I think when we think of sort of, black magic, we think of them, doing those rituals and chopping the head off a chicken and all the blood all over the place. But then again, that's the movies for us, and that's what they've turned it into. But I think that, magic of any kind can be fabulous and wonderful, or can be the opposite of that. But coming back to stigmata, I think that it's a magical thing that happens to some people who are sympathetic. The man who is having to go through all the labour pains while his wife is sailing through that. I don't think for a minute that he thinks it's a magical thing whatsoever. But still, it shows you that there are people, and again, with the example of twins, and how twins can absolutely connect with each other and know what's going on with each other. There are, and I've had this experience myself where I was very, very close to someone, and I was actually in Hong Kong and he was in England, and I could hear him calling me. and weirdly, he could hear me calling him.
Wow.
It, thoughts travel. The mind is an amazing thing, and our thoughts are living things, tiny, tiny pulses of energy that go out into the universe. So it sort of begs, it begs the question: can these things really happen? And I would say not only can they happen, but they do happen. And I think that when we start discounting things, or because it's so unbelievable, you can't know that. Okay, yes, she can talk to dead people, but really, can she honestly travel? Can she really, while she's standing in an audience of 2,000 people, is she really going back and down and through that hole that she says and seeing all this stuff and so on? Some things are so unbelievable that it's easy to discount them, but yet these phenomena happen. Let's go to the chat room and then we'll see what. Is there anyone in the chat room, Chris? Anybody?
Oh, yes. Judith said a little bit earlier in the conversation, when you were talking about wives' tales, we all heard the quote, "Don't step on a crack," or "Don't walk under a ladder," wives' tales. My parents were educated and didn't allow us to give attention to old wives' tales, but I knew about them.
Okay, interesting. I can remember. I mean, unlike you, Violet, you lived it. It was part of your upbringing, part of your culture. It was all part of you. But the only thing I can remember, and that was probably from one of the other kids in the neighborhood, if we saw a hearse go by, we had to keep our mouths closed because you couldn't show your white teeth. I have no idea why. But anyway, I do
How interesting.
remember as hearses would go by, there was a funeral parlour a little bit further up the road from where I lived. So they would go by on a reasonably regular basis. And we'd all be there, hardly breathing, hardly daring to breathe. So these things sort of do come about. But I was personally not brought up with the idea of superstition in any way, shape, or form.
Oh, roles and things and passing over because um you also covered mirrors and drawn until after the wake. There were lots of things which could respect, but actually there are beliefs that you cover mirrors so that reflected in the mirror behind you, which I
Yeah.
think is fascinating. And these things are taken very seriously. And in terms of um, the superstition, I remember I was cooking or something. Apart from throwing the salt over your shoulder if you spill it, cooking, and I was stirring with a knife, and my mother ripped into me. She was like, "Do you're stirring in trouble? Use a
Oh,
spoon."
really?
And that was because of her grandmother, who the same thing. If you were given a blade, anything with a blade in, so if somebody or a lady razor, whatever it happened to be, you had to buy it from them. Would give them a penny,
Oh,
because if you didn't, it would sever the friendship. Serious.
oh, really? I
Yeah.
remember my first one of my first trips into China, and of course, if you're traveling, you've got a camera, right? And I remember being instructed by the guy who was taking us around. You cannot. We were sort of going into the fields, into the orchards, into places where where the let's say the peasants were, and you were not allowed to take a photograph because they believed that these the people in the ordinary people there, they believed that if you took a photograph of them that you were stealing their soul.
Wow.
So, you know, we've got all of these ideas, we've got all of these things that go on, and we should have another conversation. In fact, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, around Halloween, we did a competition, and I asked everybody send in, you know, no more than five, but send in some of the fascinating, you know, superstitions that you grew up with, or the things that you know about, or the things that your grandparents told you, whatever. And we had some amazing things come in, and then I had to choose the winner, and I actually ended up choosing five winners because I couldn't really choose. But we ended up with five people who, I think, you know, the competition was you win a book or something. We sent books out to different people, and it was a fun thing to do because, you know, and then I would read out some of the superstitions. We should have a conversation about that at another time. But coming back then to original stigmata, and talking about the power of the mind, and talking about, and I love this, you know, what you said, sympathetic magic. I think that just having talked about it a little bit, I think that explains in a lot of ways how stigmata
Mm.
happens. What do you think? Do you think that that's
I'm wondering if, in some way, it's connected to an ability to heal or
yes,
healing.
yeah,
In terms of the people coming or flocking to the stigmatic, getting something from it, that I just wonder if it was a gift. I don't know. But in terms of bilocation, I actually have a involves you, Rosemary.
a what?
And yeah, it involves back in, oh gosh, I was a student. It
Uh-oh.
was around the early 90s. The
Okay,
early
oh
90s.
dear.
And I was really, really, really poorly. Really poorly. And Give the Gift of Healing, it was at the time. It was on cassette, that's how long. And and I was listening to it, and I couldn't do a thing. I couldn't even move. And I was listening into your cassette and trying to follow the ribbons and the colour and everything else. And I had a really vivid dream, and it was you, and you put your hands, you did the laying on of hands in my dream, and I felt so much better, and I thought, that can't be real. That's good. It was like, that's a bit, and I didn't think much more of it until when my nan into the spirit world in 2000. My nan passed away. He was my nan's healer. She would come round to see my nan, and I would often sit in the room as Kay gave my nan healing and put the hands on. Kay, very much of fact, was like, "Oh, Rosemary," and I'm like, "How can Rosemary be here? She's in America," and obviously completely missing the point.
In two places at the same time. Yes, yes. I'm pretty sure then that, you know, people say, well, I had a dream, but it was so real, but it was a dream. And the dream that you had was obviously my visiting you
Yeah,
and laying my hands on you uh, for whatever reason. But I had lots of patients who would, you know, we'd have the healing centres, and I'd walk into a healing centre, and I remember walking into one particular guy, and he looked at me and he said, "Oh my God, it was you, it is you," and I said, "Yeah, it's me." And he said, "No, no, no." He said, "You don't understand." He said, uh, "I was I was in bed, I was asleep, and I had a dream." and you were sitting on my bed and you were wearing that jacket that you're wearing now. And I said, oh, I guess it wasn't a dream then. I guess it was really me. And that's what he was saying. Oh my God, it is you. It was you. So it is possible to be in two places at the same time. And it's possible for other people to see you also. Um, yeah, very, very interesting. Well, we could go on and on and on about this. I am aware of time. Let's go to the chat room once more to see if we have anyone else who'd like to make a comment or a question or whatever's going on here. And it is Sunday after all. I, do thank you, Violet, for giving up your Sunday afternoon. But let's go to the chat room and see what's going on there.
All right, Rhonda says our bodies are miracles created by God from the incredible universe. I believe the body can do amazing things.
Me too. Absolutely, me too. Anything else, Chris?
Violet, this message is from Judith. You are a thinker and so interesting. I'm so glad you're here.
Nice, right?
Thank you. That's lovely.
Nice? Well, that's why we
I
have
had.
show people. That's why we have her here, because she is fascinating, very, very smart and brilliant person. Yes. Anything else going on there, Chris?
Karen says, I have a 2-year-old identical twin granddaughters.
Oh,
One day, one hit her head, and as I was comforting her, the other screamed and said, Head, showing me her head exactly the same spot her twin hurt.
yeah, yeah. It's
That's not a
amazing.
coincidence.
Let's continue to use that phrase, sympathetic magic, and sympathetically and magically. I'm going to say thank you to everyone for watching. I'm going to say thank you to Chris, great facilitating there. I'm going to say thank you to Mary Lou, who's sitting here very quietly. She's hiding from the camera, but she's sitting on the sofa next to me, not said a word. Are you enjoying the show? Violet, is there any last thing you'd like to say or to mention before we close the show today?
Just thank you and for being open to have this conversation, because that people would love to be in this position to be able to ask you and to ask Ray to have some kind of insight into this stuff. It's really and really inspiring. So thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. And anyone out there listening thinking how lucky Violet is, all you have to do is email us and say, can I go off with Rosemary? And the answer would be, if you've got a good subject and you want to talk about it, absolutely, right? Okay, all right, my darling. Just to say thank you, Violet, once again. You are my gem and you are my go-to, as you know. And to everybody out there, thank you. Of course, we do have to thank Ray Eagle, who has not said too much, but has been listening to everything and helping. I know, isn't that scary? This is why on a Thursday we titled the Thursday show "The Spirit World Sees All," because certainly Ray Eagle sees all, without a doubt. So I'd like to thank everybody. And again, Violet, thank you for doing this on a Sunday, taking up your weekend. We really do appreciate it. Thank you so very, very much. So everyone, thank you again for watching. We shall be back on Thursday. I shall be in New York on Thursday morning, but nevertheless, we'll be back on Thursday with our The Spirit World Sees All. And if you need to know any more about us, please go to our website, rosemaryaltea.com. Just a quick mention to those of you who may not know, I am in Connecticut on Saturday the 27th, a personal, in person. This is exciting, I have to tell you. Violet, with COVID, we've just not been able to be out and about. So here I am, I'm going to Connecticut. actually physically. I'm not going to be in two places at once, although I might be. But physically, I shall be in Connecticut on the 27th of August and look forward to any of you who want to know more about that. Again, go to the website, rosemaryaltea.com. So thank you all. Please, please, please. Thank you again, everybody, Violet especially. Have a very blessed rest of the day, everybody. Have a very blessed weekend and do something fun, please, today. Find something to smile at, even if it's only our little show. Bye bye, everybody.